Welcome to the Botany Bistro, where we're serving up bite-sized botany for you to munch on as you savor the science of plants. I'm Mary, and I'll be your botanist today. Our menu includes an exploration of plants in the Cucurbitaceae family. Autumn is just a few days away, and it's the perfect time to be chatting about plants in the Cucurbitaceae family. While the cucumbers have been picked and pickled in my corner of the world, there are still many members of this plant family that are about to put on their show. We're talking about gourds, pumpkins, loofahs. All of these are members of the Cucurbitaceae. Members of this plant family are characterized by their rough leaves, their rambling vines, and their showy flowers, which are also edible, so you should be sure to try those if you haven't. Fruits of plants in the Cucurbitaceae have been used for generations for tools, for bowls, for utensils, instruments. The list goes on and on. We're going to talk about a few of my favorite plants in the Cucurbitaceae, starting with when they come ripe in our gardens. First, we get these wonderful small pickling cucumbers that we pick in early summer in our children's gardens. As the summer sprouts campers come into the garden, they pick the cucumbers, cook a brine, slice those cucumbers and add them to that brine, and a week later, magically, we have pickles. Not all plants in the Cucurbitaceae are actually edible, so make sure that you have a positive identification before ingesting any plants in this family. There is a wild cucumber that I came across while I was on a plant walk in Michigan. Summer just wouldn't be the same without that sweet taste of watermelon. Watermelon is one of my favorite melons. My dad and I used to have seed spitting contests together. Any excuse to sit with my dad and spit seeds into the yard was really fun. Now my children don't have that same experience because of all of the seedless watermelon varieties that are in the stores now. And let's be honest, seed spitting is fun, but crunching into a big seed and having to figure out what to do with it, not as much. So we often do get the seedless varieties in my home. Occasionally you will see a little bit of a seed coat that has developed, those little flat white pieces. Those are not mature seeds, but it really gets us thinking, what is up with that? Why would a plant create seeds that are not fertile? Well, actually, this has been purposefully bred. Most melon plants have two sets of chromosomes. We would call those diploid. There are ways to increase those number of chromosomes. They would create a variety that was tetraploid, which had 4 sets of chromosomes. When you hybridize a diploid and a tetraploid, the result is triploid, which actually is 3 sets of chromosomes. And because that is not an even number, the seeds that are produced from that plant are sterile and don't fully mature. So you have this very interesting purposeful crossing to produce these varieties. And while seedless watermelons might be fairly popular, pumpkins actually produce quite a few seeds that as a high school agriculture teacher, I would get lots of pumpkins. And in Ohio, that's pretty easy to do since Ohio is one of the top producing pumpkin states. We would take these pumpkins and dissect them. We would look at all of the parts of the pumpkin, and then we would get to counting these seeds. On average, there were 500 to 800 seeds in every single pumpkin. So this plant really is giving us a lot to save for planting next year and plenty for roasting. My most recent home gardening experiment has been to try to grow something that my chickens are not going to eat instantly, and also have a little bit more experience with container gardening. So I wrapped those both up into one experiment this season, and I planted loofah seeds in 4 containers on my back patio, and they are cascading over my back porch, out of reach of the chickens for now. And I'm able to see all of these beautiful flowers that are coming on and these early loofah fruits. Now, I was a little concerned when I first started seeing the flowers come on because I would see these flowers open and I saw lots of pollinators around, but I wasn't seeing fruit. The flowers would just drop right off of the plant. I did a little bit more research and I found out that there are separate male and female flowers on many plants in the Cucurbitaceae, including my loofah plants. These male flowers will open first and they will offer pollen and attract that group of pollinators so that when the female flowers open later, they have pollinators around. Male flowers are necessary for a good fruit set to get that pollination, but they won't produce fruits. Those would be the female flowers. And you can identify those by the fact that they have a swollen base, which is actually where that fruit will develop. So if you see a lot of kind of solitary flowers on your Cucurbitaceae plants, that's okay. Those are the male flowers. If you're not seeing a lot of pollinators, you might want to be the bee and actually get those male flowers and get that pollen into those female flowers. But I've not had that issue. Honestly, when I'm in my garden and I'm looking at these flowers, they often are home to several different pollinators at once. And thinking about being able to harvest these flowers for a tasty treat, which I would probably stuff some ricotta or goat cheese into the bloom, twist it up so that it holds onto that little snack inside, fry it up in some oil, and oh my gosh, very, very yummy. And it has quite a bit of nutrients in it, although whether that's negated by the cheese and the oil, you know, it's all good, it's all delicious. Successfully growing plants in the Cucurbitaceae family requires a little bit of knowledge about how they grow. So many of these vines will sprawl happily along the ground. However, you can trellis them. You just need to be able to get something that their tendrils can grab onto. So let me back up a little bit. There are several different ways that plants will try to reach the light and grow upwards. And these plants employ something called tendrils. Other plants employ sticky aerial root structures that will adhere to surfaces. Other plants will have twining stems or twining leaves. These plants have tendrils, which are actually modified stems, and what they'll do is they will attach to something and coil around it and kind of pull the plant towards that object. They will not grow up on a flat surface. They do need something they can coil around, such as a pole or a lattice or cattle fencing. So they'll be able to tendril around and then get close to that object, and that will help them grow nice and tall, just like this wonderful plant behind me. And look at how beautiful she is. She has these wonderful leaves, these beautiful flowers, and this incredible fruit. Trellising plants in the Cucurbitaceae family can offer other advantages for your garden if you do a little bit of engineering as well. So thinking about maybe putting your plants on a trellis that's angled, and then the shade of those vines and those leaves will actually be a wonderful starting place for some cool season crops later in the season, such as your collards, kale, radish, peas even. Using these plants to provide shade is not a new concept. Indigenous cultures in this part of the world utilized this unique characteristic in order to plant what we would call the Three Sisters garden, of which squash is a member. The other two sisters in this garden are corn, typically field corn, and pole beans. Indigenous farmers would put these three plants together intentionally so that they could support each other. The first plant that's planted in a Three Sisters garden is corn, and that is usually a field corn that will be harvested later in the season. That gets planted in the center of what will be the Three Sisters garden, and it is allowed to grow for 2 to 3 weeks before the next round of seeds is planted, which are the pole beans. Pole beans need something to grow on, and so they take advantage of the tall corn stalks to grow around and go up. Also, the root nodules and the mycorrhizal associations of the beans, which is in the Fabaceae family, which we have covered in an earlier bistro, increase the available nitrogen for the corn and other plants growing around it. Finally, after the beans have become established for a couple of weeks, the seeds of winter squash are planted. These seeds are planted in the gaps around the other plants so that the vines can grow and act as a living mulch, which shade out other weeds and reduce moisture loss from exposed soil. The combination of these three plants together not only looks beautiful in the garden, but also is a very tasty harvest at the end of the season. Plants in the Cucurbitaceae family sometimes do present a particular challenge for gardeners, and that is the fact that they are susceptible to what we would call powdery mildew. This is when the leaves are covered with a fungus that can clog pores and reduce photosynthetic ability for the plant. In cases of heavy infestation, it actually can kill the plant. What can you do to help prevent powdery mildew in your garden? You can look for powdery mildew resistant varieties when you are shopping for seeds or transplants. You can also trellis, which increases airflow. You can rotate your crops so that you're planting them in different areas of your garden so that the spores that were left from previous years don't have a new host to infect. You can also trim back some of the leaves to increase ventilation around the plant, but just make sure that any leaves that are infected with powdery mildew you do not take to your compost pile. If you are adding that compost to your garden beds in the following season, you would want to put those infected leaves into a different pile so that you're not reintroducing those spores. Some species of plants in the Cucurbitaceae actually have white spots on their leaves on purpose, and so this is one of them. You can see these little white patches here. That is not powdery mildew. That is actually part of the plant. So make sure you do your research before you start any kind of prevention plan so that you are sure that you are applying the correct remedy for any issues that you might have. We're so grateful for you joining us on the bistro today. I hope that you get out there and enjoy those wonderful fruits, those delightful blossoms, and just appreciate all of the beautiful pollinators that are also visiting this plant. Stay tuned for more Bistro to Go.